researched now for 2 years, distributing 2 years of funding for the QEP, and we still have a few departments that have shown little interest in applying for money, which is kind of surprising. And so, I wanted to invite some high-end money askers and users to, yes, some spenders to let you know some of the kinds of projects that they've implemented in their programs, really different across the board, to show you how they use the money to sort of meet the QEP goals. So, Edley, who is possibly the winner of asking for the most money, is going to go first.
I better ask for some more.
Thank you for the opportunity to share. I'm just going to discuss some of the projects that we undertook in the past school year in our department, the Intercultural Studies program. So just to list them very quickly, these are activities beyond the classroom. In our History of Missions class, I'll talk about it in a moment, we do the MLK trip, and that's coming up in a couple of weeks from now. In our 311 Urban Evangelism and Church Planting class, a service project to the City of Refuge in Atlanta. Our World Religions class, we do participant observation at various religious sites that we travel to, like the downtown Atlanta Mosque, the Buddhist Center in Atlanta, the Hindu Temple in Atlanta, and so on. In our Theology of Missions class, we do service projects, and we've kind of traveled outside of the South to do some of these projects. So 2 years ago, we went to West Virginia to do a service project, a 4-day project with the Appalachian community. And in our 400 Urban Evangelism Church and Urban Transformation class, the service project there that Dr. Quayle leads to the City of Refuge, with Dr. Dirkson's permission, I'll ask him in a few minutes just to share 1 or 2 insights from what they've done just this past semester. So beyond our classroom, at least our courses, we take students to the Faith and International Development Conference in Calvin College, Grand Rapids, Michigan, every February. And we've been doing that since 2006, when the conference was first initiated. And the Intercultural Studies internship retreat every year at the Nicole Center, just prior to students doing their 10-week internship in a cross-cultural context. So those are the projects that we were granted funding for, and hopefully that will continue for some time to come in the future. So one of the trips we do is to the MLK Center. On the week of the MLK celebrations, I do a series of lectures, 2 lectures on a Tuesday and Thursday on the topic of praise and protest, where I demonstrate how through praise and protest it precipitated change here in the US with the civil rights movement, and I'll compare and contrast that to the apartheid era in South Africa with similar things. And we follow that up over the weekend to a trip to the MLK Center in Atlanta. So, I think all 3 pathways to responsible citizenship, redemptive service, and ethical action in some shape or form emerge in this experience going to visit the MLK Center over the weekend following the MLK holiday. So intersection of social justice issues, political mandate justice, and secondly, to think about our collective responsibility for working towards a more equitable society, what that might look like, and we get students to reflect on this, and they've done this pretty well. So that's an okay trip that we do. The Faith and International Development Conference, and I really like this conference. It's a conference that is initiated by students, it is run by students, it is sponsored by students with, of course, faculty oversight, and the ethos of this conference is simply to demonstrate how faith intersects every aspect of international relief and can intersect every aspect of international relief and development. There's some 50 workshops over the weekend, numerous plenary sessions, and presenters from around the world are placed, with organizations literally from around the world at that conference, and students have the opportunity to think more about the field of employment or education that they might want to pursue. And we can find this experience to our senior students, and we take them in the spring semester, of course. So those are the larger ones. I wanted to tell a story about our internship in Kathmandu, but in the interest of time, I'll come back and talk about that.
As we thought about the QEP in my department, we thought, are there new things we can do? But we also thought about, are there things that we do that we can now enhance, not only with money, but with the imperative and the now want to of making sure we're integrating this whole concept, this whole notion in the QEP of vocation and calling with things that we already did that were focused on perhaps professional development, disciplinary development, and those kinds of things. So we were doing quite a few good things, but now we thought more intentionally about how can we use some of this QEP funding and focus to pull together and create times for conversations that actually make these things more meaningful. We sometimes get it as faculty members looking on and thinking, wow, this is great in their development, this is going to really enhance their sense of calling and vocation. But we weren't talking about it with them intentionally. We were just sort of hoping they got it. And so that's where we've sort of focused with QEP. We have a gazillion projects that have gotten funded, and I'm grateful. And I'm not going to talk about all of them or even list them. So what I tried to do was just pull out some examples today that maybe might spark some thinking with you. And I love this because Randy and I have been on that funding committee, and that's not why we got a lot of money. I'm just whoops. But no, I mean, we just submitted a bunch, and we've had a careful rubric about how those things got funded. But what I have loved about being on that review committee for the funding was that I got to see everybody's ideas. So as I was seeing them from the very first go-round of it, I started getting other ideas and thinking of ways I could go back and suggest to my faculty. And have even told them, talk with people from other departments, or let me show you some of these kinds of ideas. And so I really appreciated that. So that's what I'm hoping happens today from all of this, is that I get sparked with some other ideas, and maybe you do too, as you think, well, that doesn't exactly fit our department, but maybe it could in its own iteration. In the category of something completely new. Now, taking students to conferences is not new in our department. We've done that for years and been able to hopefully find some funding either through the dean's office or through some other things, and through the QEP help. And we've now focused sessions on talking about that. But this is different. This year, the NCTE conference was in Atlanta, Georgia. That's the big English conference for teachers of English. We applied for, Donna Summerlin applied for funding to take some of our students, our English education students, and 2 local teachers with whom we've been teaming over the last at least 3 years probably, with joint service projects where some of our classes have linked with them to do poster presentations, to do research together. It's been a film night where they're both reading the same thing, then watching the film, and our students help lead discussion. Had some wonderful experiences with that. So those were things that were already in existence, and we have gotten some QEP funding to help facilitate those kinds of things. But this was new. So the NCTE was going to be in Atlanta. And so Donna said, wouldn't it be great if we could take these two local teachers, one is a private Christian school English teacher, another is an English teacher at Cleveland High School, secondary.
Two of the best teachers in the whole.
Two of the best teachers. One is Ms. Wood at Audrey Wood at TCPS, and the other is Linda Lemons at Cleveland High. But anyway, what if we took them? They're so loving what we're doing in connecting our students with theirs. What if we took them and some of our students who are going to be teachers, and we help them go to Atlanta to hear all these conferences? In all honesty, a lot of the local school teachers don't get funding to go to conferences. What a great weekend for our students to interact with them. So they heard these same great speakers. They're just thrilled. They remain thrilled, is what I keep hearing when Donna talks to me about this. So they spent a weekend down there, and this was through QEP funding. And then there and back and on the way, and at various times, there were those topics of conversation deliberately spawned by Donna about vocation and calling, and what does it mean to be a Christian professional in those two settings out there. It was invaluable for our students. This couldn't have happened without the QEP funding. So this was a little bit outside the box for us in thinking of including some community people even in the funding venture. That can't always be done and in big amounts, but this year it was affordable because it was in Atlanta. Transportation was the same thing. You know, you get the whole thing of how little that ended up being for us was something we would have done anyway, which was to try to take some students. Also, in the vein of something completely new, and I don't even have a slide for this because we're not even sure how it's going to work even yet. We had the idea, and Dr. Dirksen and Dr. Chris Blake in our department had the idea of, what if we bring somebody from Liberia here? You know, we've had this big Liberia initiative. What if we could bring somebody here for a semester and let them work with all these other things we're trying to do, really learn from us in terms of teaching English, and us work with them in terms of English language teaching through our TESOL program, but also let them connect in other ways with these various components of campus that we've been trying to help them. Wouldn't it be great to bring somebody here? So we submitted and asked for funding for that, to bring this person here, and then go from there. We've got a lot more to flesh out of it. We're still working on that, aren't we, Carolyn?
Yeah, it's coming.
It's coming, but you know, things like visas and things like that get in the way of that. But it looks like it now might happen, not with the original person we had hoped, but perhaps with the principal of the school. So you think if you bring that person here to get all those experiences and to then share with us here what it's like, we think it's a great QEP thing. So we'll see how that works. But again, that's an out-of-the-box thing. We almost, as we were thinking about it, hesitated to ask, but everybody was on board with it when we all started thinking about what kind of piece could we each play in that.
Let me just throw in too, that we funded that at the end of the year,
Yeah.
when there was still money left that hadn't been asked for. So we funded it, but then we lose our funding here on July 1st. So we've made a contribution to the Church of God World Missions, through which we will bring him.
Yeah.
So our money is now over there, so we're able to save it across the July 1st deadline.
There's always a way. You know, there's always a way. I have already alluded to the projects that we've had ongoing with TCPS and the English students. So that was already happening, but things sure are easier to happen and can be more effective with some funding. And so I think you need to think that way. Is there something we're already doing? I would encourage you to think, is there something we're already doing? And then have our students actually reflect on it in writing or in a debriefing focus group. Let them talk about, how does this play into my sense of vocation and calling? How is it now shaped a little bit differently? How did this inform me as a student, as a budding professional? And what does this contribute? That's what we're trying to do. And so we've indicated that we're putting these reflections in a portfolio all along as they go through their progress. But this again was the part, the QEPs helped us become more intentionally reflective and ask our students to become that. And for us to talk about it with them, not just wait till the capstone class. Another idea, and again, we've got several, but this was another idea. I had another faculty member who said, I actually showed him this summer institutes, and it's one of my language and culture teachers. And so he applied for funding to go to this. Now, there are people that ask for money to go everywhere, but you can't just always do this. This really fit, not only with what this person teaches, but also then the greater issue of the whole language and culture series that we offer as part of the core cultural diversity. And so he's going to be presenting that. So the deal was, okay, we'll help fund you to go, but you come back and share this now with us, so it's like we all went. And so we're working on implementing that sharing this semester. I love this idea too. Again, we've started getting much more connected with other high schools and other students and other populations in the area. Our French students are now connecting with the Ooltewah High School. They have an international baccalaureate program down there. We actually have found out there's a good-sized Haitian group right in that community. We've also found out, by way of this, there is a very active French Chamber of Commerce in Chattanooga. Who knew? At any rate, all that said, there are a lot more French speakers in the area than even we knew. And so Ooltewah is helping us with that because they're right there in the middle of some of that. Their students are doing service, their IB students are. Our students need and want to do service. We're now linking with them. They're creating a website for the Francophone local community. And they're excited about it. Those students are so engaged. It's potentially a good recruitment tool for us. But it is about a sense of serving others, using your discipline, even if it is what one might perceive as the little used French in this area. Wrong. I mean, it's really showing students, no, you look around enough. There are ways to connect that are beneficial for the community and for you and for younger students as you serve as role models. And again now, reflecting on what is happening here with our own students then. So I love it. QEP came in very nominally with $150 to help provide refreshments for these joint meetings. So it's as simple as that. And so it's not that the money went to some big profound thing, it's just actually making these gatherings kind of hospitable and inviting. But the kids love it. Those high school kids are so enthused, it's unbelievable. Every year, our Spanish faculty love to bring in somebody, and we've been finding ways to make that work. They usually stay in one of their homes, and they guest lecture. But we've now really focused on these people doing sessions. We've had in people who work with like a leper colony, and so we're using these people to talk about their service, their virtually sacrificial service in South America, and their language, and we're using them both in class and out. And so QEP has helped us fund these people here and some of the activities in relation to that. But it's also funded by staying in someone's home and makes it more affordable. And the QEP doesn't pay for everything, but it pays enough that we can manage the rest. And then, and I need to hurry, but along the line of vocation lunches and dinners, we've been having in most segments of the department these little small events where students get together with faculty and talk about, if I go to grad school, what do I need? Or if I do this, what do I need? If I want to go to library science, or, that we have different kinds of things. Sigma Tau Delta's been doing that for years, and we have in other areas as well. So we've had these workshops. Again, the QEP is now just enhancing those things with some little food money, not a whole lot, but it's also now made us, in that same conversation, turn this toward, how does this fit in with your thinking about vocation and calling? Well, we were just leaving that out, not because we didn't believe it or care about it, but it's made us more intentional. And so again, it's also nice to have a little bit of extra funds to have some food. Same thing with our Spanish group. We have the language cafes, and so what this has done, we still have the cafe host training for how they run these cafes that are associated with our language classes. But now, Carmen has them over to her house, because we got some QEP money to help with food. She cooks a home-cooked Spanish meal and has them into her home. She does, and I actually put her words down here, and what I've got on the screen is, she said also during that night, so they do their training, but they present an exercise to reflect on their calling and vocation, preparing them to face challenges of their faith and career, to serve as a model for other students, and to guide them in their own process. So again, we've become more intentional. We're doing the same thing, but better food, and so I know you're tired of hearing me say this, but that's essentially it. So I think you can think totally outside the box for new projects, or you can think about what do we do, but how do we make sure it's in this realm of what is the definition of the QEP? And part of the success, and Randy would probably support this too, is how you write it up. How you write it up. But in writing it up so that it fits the QEP, it actually becomes more meaningful to us as we try to explain it to students and think about how to talk with them about it. So.
basically, my advice to you, and I'm the head of history, humanities, and political science, look at what you're doing in your department first. See what you're already doing that can be enhanced. That would be the first thing to do in terms of if you're thinking about how we can implement the QEP Project 2 in your majors. And then start getting creative. But that's kind of the process we went through. I encourage us to, let's just put on the table everything we already do. How can we enhance these things? And maybe get some, $100 for food. Some event that can be increased, developed, expanded. And then secondly, let's look for new endeavors that we might want to do. In addition, one of the pieces of the QEP that if you can remember back a couple of years, we kept using the phrase experiential learning. That one of the goals of the QEP is to provide experiential learning opportunities for our students as they're experiencing these core values, right? So service and ethical action and responsible citizenship, these values, right? What experiences are they having outside the classroom or in the academic curriculum that are experiential? And my disciplines don't have a lot of that necessarily, right? You don't think of a humanities major as having a lot of experiential opportunities. They sit and read books, old books. History majors, right? Okay, you study history or political science, you're doing theory primarily. Right? If you're with school, you're doing statistics, things like this. So you're not experiencing much, you're thinking, right? So for my department, it was really important for us to then think, how can we use the QEP to inspire us to provide experiential opportunities sort of outside the classroom, not a lot of inside the classroom activity, but outside. So let me give you sort of two examples that are connected to something we've already been doing that's inspired us to do something new. Every year, political science does Constitution Bowl. It's mandated by the U.S. government that every college celebrate the U.S. Constitution in September. It's against the law to not do this. So you have to have, so middle of September, you have to have a Constitution celebration, or you lose your federal funding. So we've been doing this for years, ever since that law was passed. So the political science faculty, one afternoon, came up with a plan to, instead of just have a speaker or a guest lecture or something like this, let's do something crazy. And you can imagine our political science faculty doing something crazy. Let's invite hundreds of high school students to campus and have a competition on the Constitution, a Jeopardy kind of quiz bowl on constitutional knowledge and the Federalist Papers. And our students, our lead students, will put it on. Our lead students will kind of write the questions, our lead students will ask the questions, our lead students will be the judges, our lead students will have to deal with the high school teachers. It'll be their event, right? Of course, governed and directed by the faculty in poli-sci. What a great experiential learning opportunity. We weren't thinking of it like that when we invented it. When we invented it, it was, how do we fulfill federal law? But as we started working on the QEP, what a perfect project that is experiential, that emphasizes citizenship and service. Right? And it's something we already do and we love doing, and it's grown every year. I think last year we had over 20 teams compete, and they come from Knoxville and Chattanooga and from all around the area. So it was something we were doing, but with QEP inspiration, we emphasized the service and the citizenship, that this is really highlighting those two values as the students participate in these activities, our students. And it's, of course, experiential learning. Like they're learning how to study the Constitution, they're learning how to sort of present, they're learning how to teach, they're learning how to negotiate with
Homeschool moms.
well, boy, those are the best stories. The homeschool community wants to win, right? And that's good, yeah. But there's more stories if you want to talk later. Okay, so this is something we're already doing. We got money from the QEP just to buy buzzer systems. So we didn't need a lot of money to pull this off, but we asked for a few $100s to enhance our quiz implementation by providing buzzer systems. This was great, it's perfect, right? It runs better now, right, thanks to QEP. And the students do a reflection afterward, so we require them to reflect on their service. So this is inspired, right, a totally new event. Again, like Jean mentioned, this is something we don't know how it's gonna work yet. The humanities faculty, again, some of the craziest faculty on campus, have come up with an imitative event called Classics Day, right? And this is gonna happen this spring. We're inviting hundreds of high school students to campus to have a quiz bowl on classical things, right? Greek and Latin, and great ancient texts and things like this. I don't think togas are included. We don't know exactly what's gonna happen this day. But again, this is a totally new event, right? Inspired by this event already established that was successful. And QEP gave us a little more money on this one because it's a brand new event. So money for some materials to pull this off. So we're gonna try something similar with classical studies. And again, emphasizing service and emphasizing experiential learning as an opportunity to do this. The faculty were meeting with students last week to write questions. And so they began writing their questions last week over Christmas breaks. So there's again two interesting examples, right, of experiential learning activities that allow for reflection on QEP-related topics. We were already interested in these things, but now we're sort of intentionally doing that. So there's, again, two examples that are sort of big events. The other thing we've done in our department is emphasize, like Gina's already said, very small things that we do. Little enhancements here and there. Two examples from humanities. As Jean said, and I basically retelling her story, we have a lot of activity that brings faculty and students together to talk and sort of develop interpersonal relationships. But we weren't using that time to deliberately talk about vocation. It always came up. The humanities faculty created Faculty Fridays a few years ago, about once a month. Again, 3 or 4 times a semester. There's no required regimen. All the humanities majors will meet with humanities faculty over at somebody's house, and there'll be a meal, and they'll just talk about their experiences with Christ. They'll tell their testimony. They'll talk about grad school, whatever it happens to sort of be the topic of the day, but not very formal. But QEP again inspired us. Let's make sure that we get them talking about vocation, because they're already interested in this. They want to talk about, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I like to read books. I like to write papers. What can I do with my life? Let's go ahead and talk about this. Let's go ahead and enforce the issue. Not artificially, right, but just we're already together, we're already eating, we're already spending time sharing our testimonies. Let's tell our stories, right? How did I end up doing what I'm doing? So weave in with my Christian testimony, my story of how I became a professor. So a lot of what we do with faculty worship, faculty seminar, let's use that model. And it's been great, and all that QEP did was essentially provide food, $100 here or $100 there, for food to make these events a little nicer, a little more enjoyable. So that's a great example, again, of something we're already doing that the QEP inspired us to focus in on a topic. Also the humanities faculty, again, a small event, but an event that's really been interesting. We tried it once last year. We're not doing it this year, but we might try it again next year. It went very well. That takes a lot of time. A faculty-student reading colloquium. So on vocation, on the concept of vocation, on the idea of what it means to be a Christian scholar, what it means to be a Christian thinker. Aaron Johnson organized this. He had a faculty group established of 8 or 10 faculty from across campus and 8 or 10 students reading the same books on what it means to be a Christian scholar or something related to that. about 5 books, meet once a month. And he had the students read and discuss, and he had the faculty read and discuss. And he would be kind of the one bringing insights to both groups from the other groups. It was really fun, really interesting to get the faculty together and talk about what it means to be a Christian scholar, since that's what we are. You know, but have we really thought about it enough? And then to hear what the students were saying about this, as they're wrestling with these issues that they haven't wrestled with before. We've been wrestling with these issues for years. For them, this is new. Like Gene said, we know what it means often. They're not practiced in it. So that was a great experience. It just takes tons of time. As you think about activities, you think about how much time is involved, effort. That's when we want to do it again, just to go on. The QEP committee funded books, so basically it paid for books for faculty and for students, as well as food for the sessions. So then again, another humanities example, all this is related to vocation. The humanities faculty for years has been inviting a speaker in, a big sort of humanities lecture series event every spring. We decided to shift the focus of that speaker, at least for a few years, to vocation. Again, students need to hear that there are other scholars out there working on these issues, and some of the books maybe now that they've read. So we got money for a lecture series speaker focused in on vocation. So not just a topic in the field of literature or history, but someone who's writing on the concept of vocation. So that was a big dollar. That was, $1,000. The food for Faculty Fridays is $100. The speaker, that's $1,000. So again, a wide variety of sort of requests and activities. Just a couple more examples, and then we can hear more from others and ask questions. But what I wanted to share with you from history, again, this is a class, again, a classroom experience that the professor thought, how can I make this seminar, 8 or 10 students sitting around the table reading books, how can I add an experiential element? This is Drew Bledsoe, our Civil War historian. Well, it's pretty easy for him to be creative here. We have battlefields everywhere. So he implemented basically a series of field trips to Chickamauga battlefield, Chattanooga, near Chattanooga. And that makes sense for his topic, Civil War topics. So the QEP inspired him to think creatively about how can I add experiential learning into a regular classroom setting. And the QEP provided something interesting here, not food, but money for materials. I'm not a military historian, but detailed, big maps is what you need to go to a battlefield. So you can lay these maps out, you can study the maps before you leave, then you get in the van and drive down there, you get the maps back out. These big, beautiful laminated maps. He said, Randy, I need maps. I said, experiential learning, right? So we came to QEP and $100 for laminating maps. Right? Not a big expense, not something difficult, but wonderfully useful for enhancing a class that is already on the books and he's already taught, but it helped him do a better job teaching. So again, that's the kind of thing you can think of, something that's small, something that's pre-existing, or you can invent new things, right? There's all sorts of things. One last example from the sort of history guys, responsible citizenship. Most of you have heard Dr. Barnett pontificate at some point about citizenship. He says, what students don't do anymore? Read newspapers. So he said, what if we got subscriptions to newspapers and put them in our pod and encourage students to read the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, just every morning they're there. I said, what a great idea, right? What a brilliant way to enhance the student academic culture in our department without doing much at all, except providing newspapers for them that are always there. They're there every morning. And and not artificially, but we sort of ask them what they've been reading about. This is all casual, this is all informal, but it gets them thinking about being a citizen in the crazy world that we live in. Again, so, you know, $200 for subscriptions to standard newspapers. So again, I'm a big advocate of sitting down with your department, to go to your chair and say, help me brainstorm. Because being on the committee, it's really fun to see all the creative ideas. And the QEP is big enough to meet a huge variety of the core values, right? It's not all about going to an orphanage, or you don't have to go, you know, there's a huge variety of things that work, right? In terms of getting students to think about service and citizenship and ethics, we've got a huge set of opportunities. So take advantage of that. Be creative.
Let me just throw out this, we open this up to your questions, that as Randy was mentioning to me before we started, we'll have about $50,000 for next year, which is really a lot of money. I mean, it's not a lot of new money, and it's more than a lot of your departments have to start with, so, we have had the opportunity to fund a lot of, as Randy said, a lot of different things, and so, we have a few guidelines. One of them is, there's a section on the application where you have to say how this applies to the QEP, and that's really kind of the main thing we look at is, if you just want something, and it doesn't have anything to do with our
Yeah.
goals,
Right.
then you're less likely to be funded. But that part about how does this bring about QEP goals, and then how are your students gonna, how are you gonna know that students got that point? How are they gonna reflect on this? Those are two really important elements in that. Then, we talked a lot about providing food. We usually provide food for events like the discussion. If you're gonna do a field trip, we don't provide food, because we feel like they'd have to eat anyway.
Right,
And so we're trying to,
right.
although it is a lot of money, we're trying to spend it in a way that everybody gets some. Also, if students are going to conferences, we usually don't pay all of everybody's expenses. They've been selling pies to be able to go to the Civitas Delta conference in the past, so they're still selling pies, but we fill in to make it possible for more students to go and to reduce the responsibility that students have to pay for the whole thing. So we want students to have a little bit of buy-in too, so they'll make the pies, we'll cover some of the other expenses.
Well, what's interesting, like about that, as we thought about ways, as some of people thought, how can we get money to help cities?
Right.
Then what do we need to do to make it fit the QEP? Well, guess what happened?
It gets
It
better.
turned out to be so much better, because
Yeah, it
now we're
gets
asking
better.
those students who've been to that conference to come back and reflect in some sessions, or in a written reflection, to reflect on what that meant and how it fit in. So it's truly enhanced it, as we were just, as you initially start out, ooh, how can I get some money to help?
Right.
It becomes better, so
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that part up.
Yeah, that's really, really important.
We add course fees sometimes, and that helps, together with the QEP monies, and that covers any shortfall we may have.
But that 50,000, like for next year, if you think about it, because a lot of the things, some of the things we talked about were maybe $1,000. But most of them are $150, $200, a whole lot of the things especially Randy and I talked about, because we have a lot of similar kinds of things. And it's just amazing, the enhancements. And that's why we can give out a lot of projects, even though, if you think of 50,000, if you did 1,000 a shot, it wouldn't go very far, but it's not that. 250. Okay?
I'm interested in, of course, I'm aware of these projects that you've spoken about. I'm interested in getting speakers who are relevant to citizenship generally. One time I wanted to bring, long before he was famous, Dinesh D'Souza here, and that was $5,000. Couldn't do it. But I would like to have just general speakers on various topics that may not always be departmentally relevant. For example, there are people like in the United Methodist Church. There's a huge thing about the membership in the Congo and how they're affecting the United States Methodist Church. I don't know how to make that really relevant to the department, but it would be interesting to have a speaker on campus. I wondered if I mean, of course, you have a humanities lecture series. Sometimes campus events funds it, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't.
But yeah, it's,
But
there's no guaranteed funding, yeah.
there's no guarantee
Yeah.
of funding. I'm just saying, I wish we had more of a kind of like by the time you think of a speaker and you've thought about getting a speaker, the time for getting funding, it seems to pass me by. So I just wondered if that was a goal of the QEP is to.
I actually think that speakers are a really good investment. We've done that. And as you say, by the time you think of it, it's gone, because like we've done it for existing speaker series, but now you have next year. If you think of somebody you would want to come, it usually takes that long to get them on your books anyway. So we'll have we did our funding last year. I think we did the proposals in February and the meeting was in March, I think, for the next year, and then we did it again. So we had 2 funding periods for the money for this year. One was in the spring, so you can plan ahead, like if you need to get a speaker. And then one was, okay, we have this money left over, so now tell us what you want to do for the more immediate. So we did one in the spring and one in the fall, one in October, I think the other one was in October. So we'll announce another funding for next year's money, and that money won't be here until July 1st. So we can only promise it, we can't deliver it, so it's really can't be spent before July 1st, but for next year.
What do you think about the proposal?
Yeah, start thinking about the proposal, and especially if it's a speaker, because you're right, you do have to have some lead time on that.
And there's nothing, go ahead.
Get into chapel, more of a
Yes.
chapel as well.
Yeah,
That will offset the cost.
Right.
The primary design is for majors, and therefore the kind of department asking has been, but there's nothing to prevent interdisciplinary and
Yeah.
cross-departmental.
I think it'd be a powerful proposal if it came from like 3 different departments.
Oh,
This is really relevant
yeah.
dollars, and a speaker along the line you're talking about really could,
For the campus.
that could be on the whole campus wide.
and even some things to supplement that, you're talking about Congo, there's a wonderful book called Possible, written by the head of World Vision, and he talks about his time in the Congo, and, committing to the Congo, and how this seems like an impossible situation, but you can take your part of it and make that possible. So it's kind of positive thinking around world problems. So I think that, maybe we could get some discussion groups or some students to read the book and kind of go along with that or whatever. We can make a bigger thing out of it. The reason that this is departmental is because the funding was for part 2 of the QEP, which is what happens within the departments. So part 1 is global perspectives, benevolence, and gateway. And part 3 is capstone. But the big old middle part, and how you get your students from gateway to capstone, is the big middle part, and that's why it was departmental, because it's really discipline-based and department-based.
And our capstone assignment now, we're still working on getting a common prompt for this, but the capstone assignment now is for students to reflect not just on the content of the capstone course, but their entirely experience and all of these things. And so that's why if they put written reflections in, or if they recall these focus group debriefing kinds of reflections and things, and they're reflecting on that even in capstone and hopefully bringing it all together.
I just want to thank you for this. I was very interested in doing some of this, but I was a little paralyzed and a little fearful last year because I'm new, and I thought that I'm the kind of person that wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I thought I was forcing some connection to faith and learning. But I'm doing these kinds of things for students all the time, and I'm spending a lot of my money to do this, so I think that we have a lot of thinking to do and to explore, because a lot of these things are not so intimidating to find the connections, and it's very, very helpful. Thank you.
It really does, it helps us think about it. Like once you sit down to write, what is the connection between this event and faith? That's a great exercise.
And our own intersection and our own story that's really at the you know, it's all a part of all of this that we're doing with students. We've somehow got that connection, so we've just, that prompt.
What you said about thinking that history majors are not experiential learners. It's so funny because I teach piano, I teach pianists how to perform on stage. It couldn't be more experiential. But I've had the same thought. I thought,
Yeah.
what, I mean, what
Yeah.
can
Can I
I
do?
do?
Yeah.
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 So internships, in some way, we can finance some part of that. Guest speakers, field trips, food for conversations about vocation and citizenship and service, funding's actual service projects. We can do that.
Resources, as in the buzzers, is, we actually got some resources for the Spanish Writing Center. We have a Spanish Writing Center that needed just some resources. They're available for them. We got some help with that.
One other question, is the funding limited or restricted to undergraduate programs?
Actually, it is. Yeah, unfortunately, it is because the QEP is undergraduate.
Right, of course.
But we have also kind of found ways to, if we spend QEP money on this, then the money we were gonna spend on this undergraduate can be moved to the graduate. So it kind of, we found, some departments have found, Jean and Randy were vocal about this, but if the QEP can legitimately contribute to
Yeah.
something that the department has been paying for,
Yeah.
that does expand the undergraduates' knowledge about or experience with vocation, citizenship, et cetera, and that may free up some money that can be spent in graduate programs.
Yeah.
Or if you were, just brainstorming, but to connect undergrads with grads.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a great place for that discussion of how did you become who you were. I don't know if that's what you were thinking, but, you know.
Not
that's-
quite, but it's-
yeah. And the committee's pretty nice, so if you
We really are.
try something, send it in, we can, and we can send it
Yeah.
back and say,
We've done that several times.
Yeah.
adjust
Bias.
this.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
yeah,
just
you
say, we don't understand exactly what the connection that you're
Yeah.
making here is, if you could explain this a little better, we really wanna fund this, it sounds like a good project.
Right.
Or we'll say, we'll pay for this much of it, but we really want the department to chip in this part, or, and we haven't really funded a lot of equipment,
Right.
we've sort of,
Yeah.
But-
Yeah. yeah, but.
Or like not a computer for the Spanish Writing Center, but just some good, some helps, for Spanish writing that needed to be accessible.
So we are also, all of us are resources, if
Yeah.
you're coming up with an idea and you wanna bounce it off somebody, or if you want us to, if me in particular, if you want me to look at your proposal before you submit it for sure, I would be delighted to do that. So, and then we've got a little bit under our belt. The first time we did this, like, well, we don't know what we're gonna get, we don't really know what to ask for. And so we've sort of developed our own rubric and guidelines as we've gone through this, but we've done it 3 times? We have 3?
Is there a way to look at the past proposals?
Sure, yeah, I can do that. I can send you some past proposals that were successful.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah,
And then
that's a
let
good
Carolyn
idea,
look over
sure.
it before you send it to, because then she can say, hey, can you just tighten this up? It's gonna be
Yeah, it'll
good.
save bouncing it back to you later after the committee's minutes.